So strong.
Okay, so now we're live without the video.
Good morning. Welcome to Getting Defensive with No Video again. Seems I have a problem doing that. How's everybody on this Friday morning?
Good morning, fantasy football fans.
I don't know why it doesn't work for me. It did on Tuesday. Everything went perfectly fine when Gary wasn't here. Not one problem.
Now we finally have figured out the culprit.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I think we have.
Well, wait a minute. You still didn't play the video on Tuesday.
Yeah,
When I started it, I didn't see it. Maybe it was there. I don't know. I guess I could have overlooked it. So, hey, we want to welcome Craig. Craig, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? This is the first time we've had the opportunity to get Craig on here. I believe you're for RotoHeat.
Yeah, I started playing fantasy football 2002, 2012. It jumped into the IDP world with a league with some friends, and it's just grown exponentially ever since then for how deep I'm getting into it. I'm in Devi, and there's some Devi IDP guys that we get into there. So just like to grow in the industry. I started writing for RotoHeat and doing shows in early 2002, so it's a little over a year for me. And it's just been really nice to see the growth of IDP in general in the fantasy community and being able to connect with people like you guys to discuss it. It's been a really nice way to grow. I'm glad to be here.
Sweet. Awesome. What have you been up to, Justin?
Not much. Just trying to wrap my head around some projections and rankings now that we got this, got the draft out of the way, and little football is actually happening. I'm excited to get back to a normal preseason because last year was just such a disaster. But I do think last year's disaster has set us up for quite a few sneaky IDPs that we're going to discuss today in terms of players that might not have jumped off the map last year, but are primed to do so this year. So we're going to try and use that to our advantage.
Yep. Let me ask you guys caught any of this spring league?
Not much of it. How about you, Craig?
No.
I seen football. I had to watch a little bit of it. I haven't really caught too much of it. It's kind of like had the XFL feel to it. Mm-hmm. But the wild thing was that there wasn't anybody in the fans. So I don't know if that was because they didn't have any fans, or if that was because they just happen to be in states that aren't allowing fans. So I thought that was kind of weird. Yeah. But overall, it was guys hitting each other, so I enjoyed it a little bit.
All right, so we're still talking stock up players. Gary, you said you want to wait till we hear theirs first, right? So I'm going to go to Craig first. And you had sent me a list of a few people, and I have Jesse Bates written down first. You want to talk about him?
Yeah, and he's just a name that, he's had production for the past few years since he really came into the league, and he's been nice and consistent, but he still doesn't fall into that, from what I've seen, the league's set of big name safeties. He's a guy that's been really productive, sort of playing that free safety position more for the Bengals, and last year they had that weird setup where they were going to have three, at the time, big name safeties, and Sean Williams, I think he got hurt and then kind of fell off the map. But he's only 24 years old still. He has great production, and it'll be interesting to me because he's playing for a new contract essentially this year. He's a free agent coming up, and he's one of those guys that is undervalued to me just because he doesn't have that name recognition yet, and I've seen him just be thrown around rather cheaply in leagues still. So if you can get someone like that that's going to give you that top tier production at the safety position at a value, those are the guys that I love to see, other than some of the deeper names that we're going to get into here.
Mm-hmm.
He's had, like over 100 combined tackles, I think, the past 2 years anyway. And to be able to get that out of that free safety position is quite nice.
That is.
Yeah, and I think you could see the Bengals defense last year, particularly early, but it was throughout the entire season. They were confused. They were kind of a mess. There's some really talented players on that defense, but they just could not wrap their head around the defensive scheme. And to me, Jesse Bates was one of the few who seemed to have gotten a pretty clear handle on it and was playing cleanup duty most of the year. So I think, second year of this system, Jesse Bates, who obviously is already off to a great start, but I agree, he's not the type of guy. If you listed off the top 10 safeties for IDP, Jesse Bates might not make that list, but he's likely to end up there by the end of the year. So yeah, I agree with that one.
Yeah. Just a little food for thought. Wade Phillips was what's the coach's name over with the Rams when that organization hired the new coach they have now. Wade Phillips was the defensive coordinator, and he brought in a system that they still apply with the Rams now, and it does focus on the safeties. It is a funnel type situation. So when you had the Bengals hire that offensive coordinator, I believe it was, for their head coach, he's bringing that same system over. And I think that really reflected for Jesse Bates, besides the fact that they were trying to adjust to that same defensive scheme. There's no reason to think that he hasn't. Jesse Bates probably hasn't peaked yet in production. There's no reason. The sky's the limit. And even though they have made some adjustments this year, a little bit, hopefully Sam Hubbard's coming back. He'll be a little bit more healthy. It's still the same old Bengals, so there's going to be probably a lot of production there to be had. And Jesse Bates is probably going to get the big portion of that, the way it looks, especially the way they use those inside linebackers and some god-awful rotation. Hopefully that would change. But we'll see what they do with Logan Wilson and Pratt, and I think they they didn't really draft high this year, did they?
No, not really.
Yeah. So you got one for us, Justin?
Yeah, I got quite a few, but I want to jump to one that kind of aligns with what the concept that Craig is kind of laid out for us with Jesse Bates. That's a younger player who's got a lot of talent. Has already put some good production out there, but is still someone. It's a name that people aren't really addressing as much, and I think he's still on the upswing. And that's edge rusher Brian Burns out of Carolina. He's had a solid rookie season, had 7.5 sacks. Last year became more of a starter, got 9 sacks, outproducing a lot of people with much bigger names. And what I also like about Brian is that it was for the first 6 games he only had 2 sacks. He kind of started slow, but then he's gonna get the rest of his sacks in his next, like, for basically the second half of the season. So he's gonna get a couple of multiple sack games toward the end of the year. I think he started to kind of find his legs, if you will. So I'm expecting Brian Burns to cross that double-digit sack range, and I also think with such a young defense that they're kind of growing and building, that Burns is going to be a big part of that, and a big part of that for years to come. So I'm expecting Brian Burns to be the type of guy who's going to get drafted way too late as an edge rusher when he could actually finish in the top 10 for edge rushers.
How old is he? Do you know?
Yeah, Brian. He's 23.
Yep.
This will be his 3rd year. So
okay.
I'm getting a little bit defensive with you there, Justin. I got concerns.
All right, talk to me about your concerns.
My concern is the addition of Hassan Reddick. All right. So, the indications are that he'll be having his hand in the dirt, playing the traditional, more of a traditional defensive end play. Mm-hmm. It depends what resource you're reading.
Right.
So does that move Burns to the strong side? Does that limit his opportunities? Are they going to lean more on Hassan as the main rusher, or is it going to remain to be Burns? We do know that second-year guy, Yoda Yira or something like that, he's probably pretty much out of the picture, depending on what I can't remember what his Yoda Gross or
Yetur Gross Matos.
Yeah, he's probably taking the biggest hit. But do you have any concerns at all about Hassan being there?
Yeah, it could go a couple of ways. I believe that when all the dust settles, Hassan will be in that Sam role where he will still be rushing the passer, but will kind of fit in that Sam role. And Burns will be more of the LOLB or the the edge rusher when they're in 4-3. But this is the sort of stuff. This is always why rankings and projections this far out are always so tricky, because defensive coordinators are working on all sorts of stuff in the offseason, and we won't get to see any of that till it's luckily we'll see it before the season starts. But that I'm always looking for, like, on each team, like there's a handful of positions I'm looking for, position battles. How are they going to come out and looking? And that's certainly one of them. So yeah, you're right, Gary. That could easily be flipped, right? They may push Burns to that Sam role, and if so, then that's going to change Burns's perspective. But I think my money is on Reddick playing that Sam role, and Burns. And I think Reddick being there is going to help Burns. I'm always preaching about how much better both edge rushers will be for a team if they're both really talented. We see it over and over again. So I'm actually hoping the addition of Reddick is going to help Burns, at least in the sack area. I think it actually might hurt tackle wise, but I think for sacks it's going to help Burns. But that's what we're going to see once once the calendar turns over to August and July. We'll start seeing some of these things, and we can reevaluate.
And you could be perfectly correct on this, because you would think, the prototype player that Reddick is turned into would be more of a stand-up outside linebacker, playing possibly that Sam side or whichever. So, yeah, nobody's going to know until we get there. So,
Yeah, but for the listeners out there, that's the sort of thing that you want to be checking at, right? So once these guys hit the field, start looking for that. You can even read up on it and see what the beat writers are saying where these guys are playing, and then you'll have a feel for where these guys are going to go, and then you can kind of quickly pivot and realize that maybe Burns isn't going to have that great of or won't have that like breakout year because he is playing the Sam role.
Right. Hey, Roxanne, we have a comment for you. You can let them know that we normally don't do offense, but we're gonna let these guys do it if they want to. Craig, did you have any opinion? What do you think about Burns? You have any problem with what Justin was mentioning?
No, I like Burns as a young guy too, and I think that the NFL kind of showed its hand with their thoughts on Reddick. That this guy's had one really good year in the league. Now, some people say it's because of how Arizona had been utilizing him prior. But he had more sacks last year than his prior 3 years combined. And he only got really a 1-year deal from the Panthers. So they're kind of, to me, saying, all right, we want to see this again from you before someone throws big long-term money at him. And I'm not saying he won't hit that, but I think by the Panthers signing him, you might even end up with more value on Burns if people are shying away from him, because long-term, I think Burns is a great piece. And having that other guy there, like Justin said, if you think about what they have in Washington, when you have a young unit playing great across the board, it helps out all of their value.
Exactly. Yep. No more argument for me. I was just going to pick his brain on that, because it's been a complexing thing. There's just mixed reviews coming out, the beat writers and such, and really we just don't know. Who really knew when Chin got drafted last year that he was going to be playing linebacker most of the time. So it was until we seen those depth charts preseason, you just don't know. So there's an opportunity there for Burns, and there's no reason they can't both hit double digits. That's just used in certain ways. We lost Roxanne. What I'm going to do here real quick, we'll try. Okay, I'm going to ask this question since Roxanne took off. Twitter zone something or rather. I'm sorry. My screens are like far away, folks. I'm old. I got bifocals, having trouble reading this. But this is a quick question. Will QB Matthew Stafford soar in LA, and will he be a solid MVP candidate? Any thoughts, guys?
I don't know about MVP candidate. I think he will open up that offense more to take those shots downfield that we just hadn't seen from Jared Goff. So I think that offense as a whole has a chance to take a step forward. My only real concern is, the pass blocking of that offensive line was not fantastic last year. And I think he's leaving a better offensive line in Detroit now. So how he adapts to that is going to be really interesting. But definitely, if you look at weapons, he's going to have the potential to have a much better year. I'm just have a little bit of concern about quarterback in a new system, new offensive line, and worse blocking.
Smile, Roxanne.
I try and answer a question and I leave. It's like, come on. Why, when Gary's here, does it have to go wrong? And any other time, there's no problem. My signal is strong. I don't know.
We'll get this together. I promise I didn't touch nothing.
I don't know if I believe you.
You're going to have to go back and review the tape and just watch that when you try to do that. Watch Gary's hand. He's going to hit his button on his computer. Watch. Look, you can watch it in slow motion. You can repeat it.
I
believe you, Justin.
I want this to work. I'm not doing nothing. Roxanne, you have any thoughts on the question?
Are we talking about Matt Stafford? Because I came in right at the end. We are, right?
Yeah, that question. Do you have any thoughts on Matthew Stafford and if he's got MVP season?
I have always been a fan of Matt Stafford. I think he can excel there. I definitely think it's going to be up to him, though. He going in as old as he is with a new coach, a new system, and trying to. I don't know what they plan to accomplish with him this year. I mean, they made it to the playoffs last year. You know what I mean? You think Matt Stafford's going to take you to the Super Bowl? Well, I don't know about that. You've already been there once with Goff. It's not like you, but I would have loved Matt Stafford here in Denver. I said that before anything happened. I think his age. And I don't know, we watched Tom Brady, but I guess where I'm going is wrong because I watched Tom Brady go into a completely different system and win a Super Bowl. So it's possible, but I don't think it's going to happen. And I don't think he's going to be MVP.
Well, Justin?
Well, I think just from a fantasy perspective, I think he's going to be undervalued. I think the reason they wanted him is kind of what Craig was alluding to is I think Stafford's not afraid to let it go. They have some speed, and I think Goff sometimes was afraid to let it rip. We see quarterbacks, particularly young quarterbacks, get gun shy. We saw it last year with Tua. We saw Kyler Murray go through a couple of stretches like that. Luckily, they were brief. And Matt Stafford clearly is not afraid to let the football fly, and that offense I think would do well with that. So I think he's got top 10 as a quarterback in fantasy. Whether or not he'll bring home the MVP trophy, that's a pretty tall order. But I'll tell you this: if Matt Stafford gets the Rams to the Super Bowl, he probably will get that MVP. But it's a fairly tall order as I see it.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I can say is I think Stafford's cut out for it. He's capable of doing it. We've seen him run for his life for the last 10 years. So if he runs around over there and runs for his life, he's used to it. He knows how to handle it. So I'm not concerned about him. The MVP is all up to the football gods, I guess, at this point. But we have another comment on there, Roxanne, but I don't want to get too distracted, folks, from, the defensive side of the ball and what we're really trying to help out with today. So we'll hit this question real quick. Just tell you, it's just a simple ranking. What do you want to read that off for us there, Roxanne?
Charles Woodson, Darrelle Revis, and Deion Sanders rate 1 to 3.
Ooh. For me, it's Woodson, Sanders, Revis.
I was going to say that too, and obviously there's a little apples to oranges there with Revis mixed in with Woodson and Sanders. I think this is always the discussion about Revis. Had he done it for longer, it would just be a complete no doubter. But man, there's about 5 years where you wanted nothing to do with that cat. And I think Sanders and Woodson had longer careers, which means they were able to help their teams for longer. lots of INTs racked up for both of them. So I think I'm with you there. The Revis one does kind of muddy the waters up a little bit, though. It gets into the whole like longevity versus being incredibly elite for a shorter amount of time.
Right.
I agree. Same.
Yep.
So Gary or Craig, do you guys have any other stock up guys you want to hit?
Craig, want to hit us up with another one?
Yeah, this is a deeper one that I put on here, but I think it's a guy that's poised to have a chance to break out. Draymond Jones, defensive lineman for the Broncos. He didn't play a ton last year, but, he's been progressing through his time there. He started 8 out of the 13 games. He ended up with just, I think, over 60% snap rate. But he had 7 tackles for a loss, 6.5 sacks. He had a number of weeks where he was productive. And for a younger guy that didn't play a ton, he did have good ratings across the board for both, his pass rush, run defense, and overall. It looks like he's probably going to end up being a starter this year, which means he should have, more time starting and more time on the field. And when you're trying to sort of find value of guys out there that'll have a chance to have a higher return on your investment, he's a guy that I've been targeting this year in the offseason.
Yep.
I think we might have talked about him last week with James.
Yeah, we had a little.
We hit on the Broncos a lot last week.
Sam. It was with Sam because you and him both had that Broncos connection there. We did mention Jones a little bit. We didn't go that in depth on him.
Yeah.
If he is definitely going to be a starter this year, it's definitely, in my opinion, with even bringing old man Miller back. If Chubb can get healthy, what's that?
Don't call him an old man yet.
Old man Miller. Old man lost to step Miller. How's that one? I'm sorry. I apologize. Anyways, with Miller being back, Chubb being there, and then I lost his name now. The Shelby Harris is healthy. Mm-hmm. If Jones is in there and he's seeing those 60 to 70% snaps, if he's a full-time starter, he has definitely flashed. There's a few little ifs there, but that is definitely a good guy that would be under the radar that you have to consider if he is a starter. There's going to be a lot of attention put on those other players, and he'll have a lot more opportunities to make plays.
Where do you rank him, Gary?
Who? Miller?
Draymond Jones. Do you have him ranked at all?
Jones? No. But I don't go super deep in my rankings, so I only do top 32. I would have to imagine that he would probably be in my top 45, but that's just based off of there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys out there, so.
Well, also get into if you play DT required leagues and Jones might end up getting that DT designation in some leagues, then that certainly puts a premium on that, these defensive interiors. But it's I think that's a great one, Craig. I'm gonna kind of piggyback on that one too. Another defensive lineman who is going to fly completely under the radar, but I think who has a lot of potential. And again, this would be a deep shot later in your drafts. This is not somebody you want to take early, but and that's out of Jacksonville. That's Kayla Von Chasson. He's a player that I watched last year. Started off very slowly. The whole Jaguars defense did, but I read some things and I noticed a few things about him. Clearly being a student of the game, clearly being someone who knew he had to improve and was trying to improve. There's a lot of X factors in how, a 6th rounder ends up in the Hall of Fame and a first overall pick flames out in 3 years. There's a lot that goes on besides just talent and whatnot. There's drive. There's, are they spending their weekends studying the playbook, or are they, spending their weekends having fun? All that sort of stuff. And little things I picked up from Chasson seem to tilt toward the fact that this is a guy who is trying to get better. And when you look at the numbers, you see that that's what happened as the year progressed. Really, weeks 1 through 12, we got almost nothing out of this guy. But the last 4 or 5 weeks, we started to see his quarterback hits and his quarterback hurries go from like 0 to 1 to more like 3 and 4 a game. So to see that last little uptick, now he's going to have his second season. This Chasson is the kind of player that might be somebody that you could grab. Nobody's going to be thinking about this kid, but he's the kind of kid that'll kind of come out of nowhere. You're like, wait, I wasn't even paying attention to that guy. So if you want to take a shot deep, he's not going to be high up on my rankings, but he's somebody that has the potential. He's got more. He's got a lot of upside. So that could be a deep shot you could take.
Well, I noticed last year too that he did come up towards the end of the season. Was he playing the strong side linebacker, or was he staying on the defensive end?
Well, he early in the season, he went back and forth from left end to right end, but toward the end of the season, they just stuck him at right end. I think they must think that's his more comfortable position. He basically not stayed completely, but the majority of his snaps were at right end, toward the end of the season. So they might have found something. We saw this, different scenario, but we saw this with Bud Dupree and TJ Watt. TJ Watt can play anywhere, but what they realized is that if they stuck Dupree on his more natural side, they would get more production out of him. And that's why we saw Dupree kind of, jump up with consistency and production is they made a tweak, and instead of just constantly flipping them, they kept Dupree where he could be at his best. And this is all, we're just taking tiny little bits and pieces of smoke signals and we're looking to see what happens as the preseason training camp rolls around. But there's a chance that we saw a little upswing in Chasson that we're going to see that really take off this year.
Craig, got any thoughts on that?
I do like that as the deeper one as well. And I think it's only going to help him if Josh Allen can sort of return to form that we saw his rookie year. I mean, he's going to be the bigger name when people sort of look at that defensive line for Jacksonville there. It's those two and, a bunch of sort of underachieving defensive tackles and some older guys that they signed to give them some veteran depth on what is a really young defensive front there. So I do like Chasson. Like you said, he flashed. He was a high draft pick, so clearly, they have a plan for him that they want him to succeed, and they're going to give him time to do that. But I really do think a lot of it's going to depend on Josh Allen because he's going to need someone with how young and raw he is opposite him to be able to get to the quarterback, so it's not just him and nothing else, sort of like what they ended up running into with Josh Allen.
Right.
Roxanne, do you want to answer the question that's in the comment?
No, I know nothing about wrestling. And I'm scared if I touch anything, I'm going to go away again or mess it up again. So I do not want. My hands are back here.
Right. I'm just going to say the four horsemen.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, the four horsemen, and we got to move on there. Yeah, that's about as far as we're going to go. If you have any IDP defensive questions, please hit us up, especially if they have anything to do with the topic today of stock up. With that being said, I think I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to add at least a name. Last year, I was really excited to see Armani Hooker of Tennessee Titans. Me and Jeff actually talked about them in depth, and I wrote up a couple of things, told people to get him on their rosters for dynasty purposes more than just the redraft last year. And lo and behold, they've let Vaccaro go, and Hooker is lined up for a bigger role this year. Apparently, it will be at the strong safety position. Of course, that's just a rumor or whatever reports. We won't know. I really like this. I mean, Vaccaro, for a guy that, where did he start out at? Jacksonville, or was he the Saints dude? Because I always get him and Cypher.
Yeah, he was Saints, yeah.
Yeah, I get him and Cypher mixed up because I can always consider them two to be about the same player. Good in the box kind of guys, run stoppers, but really not all that gifted in coverage. So I think that they actually, I'm not sure how Hooker will be when it comes to being in the box, but he has great coverage skills. So I suspect that he's going to be on the field in one form or another for all the snaps. And I believe that there is no reason, if they do what they did in the past, that we can't see triple-digit tackles out of him. And I think that he's going to go from a very obscure low DB2, DB3 up into the DB1 conversation really quick. Just a guy I thought that I might throw in.
I thought you were waiting for me to help you pronounce Hooker, and it's,
No, it's good. It's good.
Now you see why he kicks Roxanne off.
Yeah. It's going to be we'll talk about him here in a little bit. Just look up the middle linebacker's name for the Raiders. Go ahead.
You're telling me
got any thoughts on Hooker? I mean, I know he's kind of a plain Jane guy now. He's out. When Vaccaro was released, I understand this is not a deep call. But I just kind of wanted to put it out there. The guy's got triple-digit potential, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think so. When we're talking about stock up players, we're going to have some players that I've got some players on my list that are pretty big names that just didn't do as much as people thought last year, but are likely to, because things have opened up for them. So sometimes these, some of these stock up players they're going to be like, you think they're DL5 or DL6, but they might be DL3. Or some of these players you might be thinking as DB2s that are going to actually be top 10 players.
Right,
so stock up is stock up. I agree. I mean, I think Hooker is going to be their strong safety. I think we saw if Vaccaro did as well as he did, and I know they used him in a different role. I'm blanking on his name now. Who was the guy who was their slot corner 2 years ago that he played?
Logan Ryan.
Yes, right. Logan Ryan had a monster year. Vaccaro had a solid year last year. Byard, really solid and consistent player. But in general, I think Hooker's going to slide into that Vaccaro role and do at least as well, if not better. So I like that call.
Yeah, and it looks like he's had really high snap counts in 2 out of the 3 games last year. I don't know if that was due to injuries or just other situations going on, but he had nice games of at least 7 total tackles in there. One of them he had a safety. It looks like there's another one he had an interception. So it seems like he's got a nose for the ball, and for a guy that you can probably go out there and find on your waiver wire or get him for cheap as a trade throw-in. Like you said, he's coming into what seems to be a starting position. And to get that sort of value for little to nothing, that's definitely stock up.
Yep. Sweet.
And you wanted the middle linebacker from the Raiders, right?
Yeah, because I want to hack that name up. It ain't going to matter.
It's Nick Kwekowski.
There we go. Yeah, I just wanted to bring him up because I want to remind people that had some questions on Twitter this past few days. And I didn't originally really think about him as a stock up guy, but the guy turned around and got hurt the first game, almost tore his pec. And he missed a couple of games, and he played through the year banged up. And everybody was all basically talking about how Corey Littleton was failing and Noro was coming in and filling in very well for the injured, what's his name again? Kwekowski? There we go. Nick, we're going to call him Nick. So he filled in.
This is honestly my favorite part of this podcast.
Hey, that's why we bring him in. Right. That's why our subscribers numbers are out the roof. I think we're at 80.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, speaking of subscribing, please subscribe because we will be giving away 2021 Gridiron Ratings draft guide soon for one for every 50 subscriber we have. But back to Nick. I like Nick because I think that, I was a little higher on Nick last year than I was Corey Littleton. And I think that came to fold because I didn't trust that Corey Littleton could be the same player that he was with the Rams. And I know Nick did not shine last year, but I just want to remind everybody he had a pec injury early on in his season that was, at first it was feared it was tore. So And he really graded well enough in coverage this year that some sites, PFF, a few of them had him in their top 20. And I could see he's got the run stopping ability, but if you're playing with a tore pec muscle in your chest, you're not so keen on throwing that body in there, stopping the run like you would be where he could go out in coverage. So I suspect that I haven't dropped him on my board. I'm hoping that he's healthy. I don't want people to let him slip too far down in drafts thinking that you're just going to have the same guy that you had last year, because it's a very good possibility that I think he was just shy. I think he was maybe somebody, could you look that up, Roxanne? I think he was like around 80 or 90 combined tackles. And that was missing 2 games, playing hurt. There's no reason that I can't see that he could hit the triple digits too and be more of a solid linebacker one the entire season if he's healthy.
Yeah, he always did great filling in when he was with the Bears, right? He was the backup, and with as many injuries as the guys in front of Roquan Smith and Danny Trevathan, they'd get banged up from time to time, and they'd plug in Kwekowski, and they wouldn't lose a step. He'd put up good numbers, and so yeah, I was with you, Gary. I was hoping for big things out of Kwekowski last year, but yeah, injuries are injuries. So if he's fully healthy, there's no reason to expect him not to put up the kind of numbers we were expecting last year. Just got to see what's going to happen with this. We've already talked before. We don't think Corey Littleton, is the answer there. It's just a matter of how they're going to divide that up with Nicholas Morrow and whatnot. But they didn't go out and take a linebacker early in the draft, so they must feel pretty confident about that pick. So I think he's gonna be fine.
He had 81 combined.
Yeah, it was That's I mean, it's mediocre linebacker, low linebacker 2 numbers, really. So anything
but
on
if he had the other 2 games, it could be pushing him up a little farther.
Yeah. His average 2 would have probably been more consistent. I mean, if he was able to stop the run, if he was actually, I just couldn't imagine. I mean, it's, that's an injury. It's just an injury. Every time you hit a dude, you're going to feel that. So what do you think, Craig? Anything on him?
I actually have him in most of my leagues. He was a guy that most of my league mates weren't paying attention to. Yeah, Justin said, I loved him in Chicago when he would just, every time you saw one of those guys was going to be out with injuries, most of the time he'd be on the free agency wire, and you could go pick him up for nothing if you needed a guy to fill in, and he'd do great for you. Like I said, that linebacker core was just a mess last year, and I think this year will be really telling for what happens going forward, because both Nick and Corey are free agents after the 2022 season. Yeah. And it sounds like that safety, Diablo, they took out, I think it was Virginia Tech, one of those, on like the 3rd round. They're saying he's probably going to end up playing linebacker. So we have to see if that comes to fruition. And if it doesn't, their safeties are going to be even more of a mess, because then they have, 4 or 5 safeties they've gotten in recent years. The Raiders' defense as a whole is a mess to try to sort out. But if you're just looking at those 2 guys, I like Kwekowski over Littleton too.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time trying to convince people to look past Corey Littleton in drafts and get the better value with Kowalski at the end. Now, neither one really panned out to any. Well, I guess Littleton just flopped. I don't know if we can actually say anything else besides that. The questions that came in was, what happened? What happened? Well, you didn't listen. It's just maybe Littleton bounces back. Who knows? I mean, it's a possibility, but it's just he was a productive by default as a Ram. And they tried to do the same thing with Kaiser last year, and it's just not panned out. I mean, Kaiser, I guess he could come back. I like Ernest Jones up there personally. I think we've talked about that, Justin. But, why they keep disrespecting Noro, I have no idea. I mean, the guy's been on the team for a long time. He's always came in, did fairly well. He had his best season of the year last year. I don't know what the cap hit would have been, but if it was me, Littleton would have been gone. He would have just cut him let his ass go, because in the end, I think that Littleton's going to end up playing that strong side linebacker position, which he finished up the season last year as, and that's a lot of money to be paying a strong side linebacker that's not even a full-time player.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anybody?
I was just going to say we got a question here from Ricky Butts. He says, I can keep 4 of these linebackers and we'll have a period of time that I can trade any of them that I don't franchise. Here's the list of I think it's 6 or 7 linebackers. So he's going to keep Zach Cunningham. He's going to keep Deion Jones. So he needs 2 of the remaining: Quan Alexander, Jared Davis, CJ Mosley, Sione Takitaki, or Leighton Vander Esch. Off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and take off Quan Alexander. I think he's been a highly overrated player for years, and we're seeing he's just falling more and more. So to me, I would cut Alexander. That would leave Jared Davis, Mosley, Takitaki, and Vander Esch. You guys have thoughts on those?
I know I've heard Gary talk a lot about Vander Esch. I think he likes him.
Oh, well, no, the talk about Vander Esch is that, he's probably on the downslide. So not to correct you, not getting defensive with you. Actually, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't have a roster spot for Alexander, for Taki, and I would be trying to trade Vander Esch, trying to see if I can get any value. I like me and Justin both like Jared Davis up there with the Jets as a possible breakout for him, which is funny because the guy's been in the league for 4 or 5 years. He's just never panned out as a Lion. But I don't see any real, Mosley, he's going to have to show up this year. So what do you think, Craig?
I would honestly stick with the 2 Jets as of what we know right now to see what happens. I'm a Dallas fan, and as much as I like the potential of Vander Esch, I wasn't happy with the pick at the time just because of the injury history the guy had, and he just hasn't been able to kick it. And I think Dallas has shown their hand with this draft that, he's not going to be long for staying on that team. So where does he go from there? That's more of an unknown that I'm willing to gamble with at this point. And like you said, Taki, you're not even really sure that he's going to end up starting this year. Alexander's hurt for the foreseeable future. So, it kind of narrows it down for itself for me.
Well,
yeah, so that would be Cunningham and Jones, which you're already keeping, Ricky, and then Jared Davis and CJ Mosley. That's probably your best group there. Too many questions for Taki, Vander Esch, Dallas, and Craig. You might know this, but I haven't read this yet. I know they were balking at picking up his 5th-year option. Did they pick it up, or did they decline it, or do we know yet?
I'm pretty sure it has not been picked up yet. I don't know the deadline.
Yeah.
It may have come already, but the last I heard is they weren't picking it up.
Right. So all those are bad signs for it doesn't mean Vander Esch isn't going to, pick up somewhere else and get healthy and have a great career. But considering your other options, Jared Davis, we think was one of the many players that just got spun in circles playing for the Lions.
Yeah.
Man, that defense really did not like playing for Matt Patricia. Lots of great players, hopped off that island as soon as they could and had not nice things to say. And a lot of really good players there were underperforming. So I think Davis still has a good skill set there if he can play next to Mosley, and those Jets linebackers in particular, can load up on a lot of tackles. We saw them plug and play a lot of different linebackers last year, and almost all of them produced in that role. So I agree. I think that's your list there, Ricky. I hope that helps.
Yep.
Thanks for the question.
Craig, Justin, either one of you got another stock up player you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I got a couple. Craig, you got somebody? If not, I'll fire a couple off here. I got a couple of linebackers I can talk about.
With the, I had one that I just wanted to throw in there quick from the Titans. I play in a lot of leagues where they've adopted that edge position now, and then it also then gives you that interior line position which is, by and large, defensive tackles just gain a lot more value, just like if it was a defensive tackle specific league. But a guy that I think could have some just long-term defensive line potential by himself, Jeffrey Simmons on the Titans, I think, is just starting to scratch the surface of what he can do. He was a guy that was looking at being a top 5 guy in his draft before he got hurt. And then there were some other issues. When he played last year, he played a good amount, but then sort of like as a theme today, when you build up the people around him, they have Dupree there that they added in the offseason. They have Landry still there on the other outside. They're going to have guys that he's not going to be the main focus of attention. And I just love his spot. He's still young. He's going to be 24 this season. In my leagues, he was a top 15, top 20 interior line guy last year. And I just think the sky's the limit for him.
Man, I'm 100% behind you on that.
Real quick? My computer cut out, and Gary left. But who are we talking about, real quick?
Oh, Jeffrey Simmons, the defensive tackle.
I need to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I loved Simmons coming into last year. He was one of my stock up players for last year. Just and you're right, just did not get enough help. I know we talk about this stuff over and over and over again, but it really is true to have help. If an offensive line. If it looks across and they're like, all right, well, we've got 2 guys here we have to stop, and then so they're going to load up on those guys. When a defensive line becomes incredibly difficult to stop is when they look around and like, all right, well, I don't know which of these guys to double team, right? Yep. Then it creates more opportunities. This is what we see with Aaron Donald, and we saw it with Tj Watt for a while there too. It's like at some point. Teams and Fletcher Cox has gone through this in his career. Some point teams will just literally triple team the best defensive lineman, and you only Aaron Donald had his best season when he had Ndamukong Suh next to him because then it became too much. Teams couldn't just triple team Aaron Donald, right? Yep. So obviously this is a different level of discussion, Aaron Donald to Jeffrey Simmons, but. Yes, getting this help on the outside that they really did not have at all last year. The Titans struggled to plug that hole. To get this help on the outside is going to open up a lot of things for that defensive line, which of course is going to help Simmons. And I agree. I think his breakout year just might come 1 year later. Although I say breakout, he had a great season last year. But I would not be surprised to see him jump into the top 5 of defensive interior.
Well, I caught the name Jeffrey Simmons. He was actually one of my breakout calls last year. And he didn't quite live up to where I thought he would. But I do agree from what I caught there at the end. I'm suspecting you're saying adding Dupree. Yeah. Landry's not quite been that guy either that we'd like to see. But the addition, and believe it or not, I don't know if Autry's name was brought up, and I know Autry is 30-some years old now. But I like the addition to Autry to that rotation or on that line. So hopefully that does open it up more for Simmons to, get into the backfield a little bit more.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw out a couple of linebackers whose roles have been pushed to the forefront based on some roster shifts. We're gonna these are probably fairly obvious, but they're not necessarily household names. And you might have had them last year and are expecting similar production, but there's a good chance their production is both going to go up just based on opportunity. First is going to be Jordan Brooks, who should be taking over the KJ Wright role in Seattle. Wright, is always overshadowed. I always think of him like he's like the wind beneath my wings. He's like the guy who is always like in the shadow of Bobby Wagner. Yet he, consistently can put up LB2 and LB3 numbers. Well, now that role is going to go to Jordan Brooks. So I could see Brooks, popping up on, as an underrated player. And kind of a similar thing would be Bobby Okariki for the Colts. He should be the next guy up next to Darius Leonard now, because Anthony's gone. So both of these guys should see an uptick in production. I don't see any of them being top 10, top 15 LBs, but these are the kind of like players you can get for your LB LB3 and LB4 slots, that you can get super late in drafts that are likely going to help boost the back end of your LB roster.
Yep. Hopefully they don't re-sign Wright. Did you see those little blurbs over the last couple? Oh yeah, wouldn't there be a bunch of upset people that's been, but I mean, I cut it out. If I was Wright, I would be holding out for the Wright contract, hopefully that's what he's doing right now, because I don't think he's signed. So any thoughts there, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, Brooks, he didn't come to mind for me because he was taken so high. Just the people that I've been leagues with just were in love with the spot for him long term. So unfortunately, I won't be able to get him cheaply in any leagues. But I do love the call there, especially if Wright isn't around. Okariki is a deeper one. With Anthony Walker leaving, going to the Browns, he should have that opportunity. And he did show up last year. When he was filling in for that linebacker core, which had some injuries last year, he showed you, why he was I think it was like a 3rd round pick or something like that.
Well, he actually, a lot of people don't know this, but he, if you look at the snap counts, he actually replaced Walker about the 3rd game as a starting middle inside linebacker. The reason Walker kept mixing in was Okariki got hurt. They had this injury thing going on between the two, so they kept kind of getting in there. But officially, it was around the 3rd game of the season they named okra. Fry me some okra with the okra. Yeah, they got him in there, and he actually was. So if we divide up, if we look at the snaps and if we look at the production between the two, I have no problem thinking that he could actually get near that triple-digit combined, tackles. If they don't try to mix anybody else in, and he can stay healthy. Not to cut you off there, Craig. I apologize.
No problem.
We do have another
question real quick.
Yeah.
Let me read it. Okay.
Yep.
It says it's from RotoHeat Sully, and it says new to IDP in 2021. When should I start looking to add IDP roster spots in my startups?
Justin, it's noon, so if you have to go, buddy, I'm not running you off. I'm just, you want to.
I was about to say that. I'll drop.
Just shut up. You get it done. Right, I got it.
But I'm going to just say a very short thing, and then I'll bounce and let you guys take it from here. But I think the general rule that you should follow is, or at least the rule that I tend to follow is, get your starting offensive lineup together first, and once you start looking at once you start looking at depth, then you can start looking at IDP. And part of the reason that is because IDP is still something that isn't as widely discussed or talked about. So if you are on a site like RotoHeat, that means you already have access. You have inside access to how to find good values for IDP. So if you've got that insider access, you want to use that to your advantage and wait longer than the average person for IDP, because you can load up on a bunch of players who are going to be undervalued. They're not household names. That's going to allow you to stock up on some offensive players, and you'll be able to make it up on the back end. All right, that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much.
We'll see you next week, Justin.
See you guys.
Bye, Justin.
Nice to hang.
See you in 2 weeks. And I will be right back after Gary.
No problem. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, I think you really, and I'm assuming this is just more sort of a baseline introductory IDP league. Most people don't jump feet first into, each specific position with tiered scoring or anything. So I think Justin's point is well received, but just make sure you understand the scoring for the different positions. And, there's sites where you can sort of plug in your league scorings to see how people would have scored in previous years to get a handle on how that relates to your offense. And, assuming it is lower scoring than your offense, if you get that offense set and you're starting to see that value of your defensive starters surpassing what you're going to have for a backup or even maybe a late flex guy, that's when you want to start looking at getting long-term guys for your team.
Yeah. And again, exactly right. On all accounts, the trick, if I had any advice, is to try to find some projections. Okay. because, I mean, we're telling you to go ahead and get your offense, at least your starting lineup first. Get that starting lineup first. But look in projections and see when the first IDP start falling in projections, because you actually, depending on the format, so we have a thing called balanced IDP. IDP, that means amongst the IDP positions, the scoring across those positions, cornerbacks, defensive backs, or DL or whatever, is all balanced, or you got sack heavy or tackle heavy. But you also got to worry about whether or not that IDP is balanced or not balanced to offense. Right. Because if this is a startup league, you might find that in projections, that's an indication that IDP is not very relevant. So you'll want to make sure that you've got IDP up and say if this is a standard size league, I would say somewhere in that top 50 to 30, you should at least have IDP showing up. If you don't have them showing up in that top 50, then just draft all your offensive guys and then move over to IDP. One of the things that I used to love to do 10 or so years ago, before IDP was really catching on with a lot of people, is I'd get in these leagues and I would turn around and just to throw a wrench in it, I'd wait until about the 4th or 5th round and I'd take the first IDP off the board. And next thing you know, everybody's panicking. Yep. And they're starting to get all these IDPs, and it just throws a wrench in the whole draft. And I just sit back and giggle. That was I was a little bit more of an asshole back in those days. I just kind of enjoyed that. But certainly, go get your offense first. Definitely get that offense first. That's a great question. We actually, if you guys catch us here within the next week or two, we'll probably have a show or two just dedicated. We'll have some more guests on or something, but we'll have a show dedicated to draft strategies and how different guys might approach it. I think a lot of us nowadays are kind of on the same page, especially when you have the type of scoring formats that's popped up recently. It used to be just one, or either sack heavy or tackle heavy, but now we have a balance across the board. So now you got to worry more about what the offense in your league scores compared to your IDP. Yep. So, but that's for a later date. Thanks for the question. Any more players? I have one more I'd like just to bring up real quick, Craig, if you have time. But if you have one, I have time.
No, go ahead.
I think Roxanne's got a few more minutes.
I got a few more minutes. Yep.
Excuse me.
Yes. This late start is messing me up. I got like a half hour. I'm good.
Okay. We'll probably have another 5 or 10 minutes here, maybe. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, that's fine.
Craig, I wanted to hear your thoughts on Anthony Walker, though, because if James was on here with us, you two could sit here for an hour and just talk about him. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on him.
So I like him, and this really isn't a long-term play, but it's more for this year. I think he's going to end up starting the year, at least starting for the Browns. They haven't really been able to figure out this linebacker core of theirs, and it's not like he did anything amazing last year. He was sort of a product of his situation. And even the year before, he was in a situation next to Leonard where he was able to get those tackles. And if you look at his ratings last year, and it probably makes sense why he ended up getting benched for Okariki with the Colts, he wasn't great across the board. But the Bengals have a nice defensive line where those linebackers are going to be able to be more free. I'm sorry, the Browns, yes.
Yeah, just making sure they understand.
Yep. And I'm not sure what they're going to get out of JOK as a rookie. My feeling with him is they're probably going to run into a situation sort of like with Isaiah Simmons last year on the Cardinals, where they're going to have to figure out how they want to use him. And it may come along faster with them actually able to have, at least we're hoping, sort of a real offseason for rookies to try to use these guys in camps and figure them out. If he does come along quicker than Simmons did last year, this could throw a wrench into it, but I still don't think he's going to be a day one starter. I think you're going to have Walker starting. And for IDP, at least, if not real NFL, getting what they want out of him, he's been able to be productive when he started. So as a one-year guy, sort of on a one-year contract, I think, with the Browns, if you're looking for cheap depth, I don't see him rostered in most leagues I'm in, but I think you're going to be able to get good production for at least, the first half of the year out of him.
Oh, I think he's sneaky. I think he's going to be a straight LB1 through the whole season.
Wow.
I like him up there. He's the veteran. He's ran defense before. He's not maybe the most talented guy on the roster because they've drafted this JOK, but I mean, when you look at their other options, Mac Wilson's not worked out. Tacky's not worked out. Goodson, he was productive by default. They just couldn't leave him on the field the entire time. I'm not sure they will with Walker, but I got a feeling it'll be Walker will see a good 90% of the snaps. So I like him being up there. Who'd you have for another breakout? Were you looking for one, Craig?
That's what I had. The only other name that I had, and again, it's sort of like Simmons.
Breakup at Stock Up. I'm sorry.
Quentin Williams on the Jets, especially with that new head coach coming in. He's even made comments. And Williams sort of had a breakout last year, but with adding those players around him too, where he's not going to be sort of the sole focus defensive lineman guy there.
Mm-hmm.
He's super young. He's 23. He has that great draft capital. 10 tackles for a loss, 7 sacks last year.
Mm-hmm.
He just played well across the board with nothing else. I really feel the sky's the limit for him, and there's a good chance that he's going to be one of those guys that stays up there in the top 5, top 3 defensive tackles or interior alignment for a long time going forward. But he's also just a guy, because he isn't one of those top-end names yet, that's going cheaper than he probably should be.
And I agree. I believe he broke his foot, actually, and he probably would have had a better season towards the end. I'm not sure if he went straight to IR or not, but he just recently had foot surgery. So I did have a little bit concerns. I mean, long-term dynasty-wise, I see this dude being a top 5. That's not a problem, especially when you consider what he did with that porous junk of a defensive line and edge rushers group that they have front 7 with the Jets, and he shined out of that. So I totally agree. When I did my rankings, I actually had somebody ask me how come I had him down and below like Hayward. And I'm a little bit concerned about the foot. I mean, that's a lot of big man to be on a foot. And hopefully it all heals up and he's ready for preseason and there's no problems going forward. And I'd love to move him up about 4 or 5 notches starting the season. Hopefully the Jets, again, going through another set of coaches and all this crap that they can't seem to get right up there. Hopefully they're going to fix this defense, and that is the kind of player that you build around on that defensive line.
When was his surgery?
Pardon me?
When was his surgery?
I could have swore it's just been in the last month or so.
Okay.
So
he won't be out there for a few more weeks doing anything.
Yeah. So I think they're saying they think he'll be ready for the beginning of the season. I'm pretty sure that was the last I had seen on it.
If he heals, properly, he should be good to go.
Yeah. I mean, the guy's probably 350 at least or something, maybe 300. I don't know, but that's still a lot of weight pushing off of that foot. So foot injuries are kind of funny when it comes to defensive linemen. I got one more guy I wanted to mention.
Okay.
And that was basically Kyle Duggar up there in New England. I don't know if he's under the radar for some people or not, because I haven't drafted recently. And I'm going to throw a warning about Adrian Phillips, which a lot of people know that I have really pulled for last year. And every time that he had the chance with the Chargers to step up, I pulled for people to pick him up and play him on a weekly basis, depending on the matchups. So he was a breakout candidate for me. He did well, but I'm telling you, sell him with Hightower returning, with the other linebackers they have, with Duggar going to be there. I think Phillips has turned more back into a safety, and he's going to be a part-time guy. And I think it's time for Kyle Duggar, which is a second-year safety. He graded so well. He played at such a high level when he got the chance. He did make rookie mistakes, but I mean, everybody does as a rookie. And plus, we're talking about the COVID year. And I really like Duggar. If you can get him, I think that the drafts that I have been in, I've seen him slip down to like the third or fourth wave in defensive backs or safeties coming off the board. And I wouldn't hesitate whatsoever to take him in a second wave. I think that he's got more than DB2 written on him, but it probably better off in a dynasty league going if you're going to reach for him. But take him where the flow goes and see what happens. Now I do like Hooker more than him, but that's just because there's less question about Hooker when we talked about Hooker earlier. Any thoughts on Duggar? I think it's Duggar.
Yeah, for this year, I agree with you. It's going to be more interesting to see how Belichick uses him because it's going to be what looks to be his first year starting. But, he was the first pick they took in 2020. And Belichick loves those kind of guys, that he can use all over the field. And his athletic profile fits that. And even what you saw of him last year, they would use him that way. So, when you have those opportunities to get some of those linebacker snaps out of your safeties, that's just going to increase their value even more. I agree. This year, he probably belongs down in that third or fourth wave. If you can get him in that fourth, so be it. That's even better value. But I wouldn't be going higher than that just based on not being sure how he's going to be used this year by Belichick. Long term, I love him. He's one of those guys that's probably in the second wave just based on where he was taken and what that Patriots defense is going to be using him like. So I love the choice there.
Yeah, cool. Well, Roxanne, Craig, I think what do you guys think? Wrap this up.
Wrap this baby up for the week. Craig, it was a pleasure having you on. We will definitely schedule you again.
If you'd like to be on, man, we'd love to have you down the road.
Yeah, I'd love to be back. It was great to sit in here and talk to you guys and meet you guys and go over this. Anytime I can sit down for an hour or so and talk to people about IDP, it's a good day for me. So thanks for having me.
Kind of caught us on one. We're usually a little bit more professional than this, but we kind of I had to answer this. I apologize, folks, and whatever, but we're informal at the same time. So
that's the internet. Stuff always comes up with technology.
We can have fun too. It's okay. You don't always have fun.
Yeah.
So
especially our Friday show.
Everybody, please subscribe, comment, like on YouTube, follow us on Twitter. We will be adding Craig's handle to the description and Twitter or on YouTube, so be sure to follow him. Yes. And it's right there. RotoHeatKraig, right?
Yep.
All right. Give him a follow. Good stuff. I'm sure he's got a lot more coming our way. Bye.
I'll be in touch with you, Craig. You both have a good weekend.
Good. Yep, you too.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and make sure you go subscribe to our YouTube channel.